Okay, today we're gonna go over a couple of tools that, when you're making composite images, will allow you to get some shadows and lighting correct, so that as you're pulling different images that were taken at different times in different lighting in different places, you can make them start to blend together a little bit better, so that the shadows are consistent with the different images, and it all looks like it's actually taking place now. So as we've taken pictures of ourselves and other people, and we're starting to include those, you'll see here the couple of pictures I've taken in front of the green screen, in front of a background picture that was taken. Clearly the lighting is different, whereas the stuff in front of the green screen is front lit. It's going to be very even lighting throughout because you've got lighting from multiple angles, but it's all coming from the front. You'll notice too that the lighting from the green screen, the images from the green screen kind of have a green halo to it. So one of the things we're going to do is we're going to adjust our color curves. So when we do that, the first thing we're going to want to do, you'll notice on the right hand side in my layers, I've got my original image. So if I take these out, okay, I've got my original image, and that is underneath. And I want to keep that there because I don't necessarily want to lose that information. What I've done is I've created a couple layers on top of that where I've masked out different parts of the image. And the reason I did that is the lighting is so drastically different in this section of the image to this section of the image. So when I adjust those, this I can adjust to make it look like daylight, but then it makes this stuff in the background look a little too bright. So I want to be able to adjust those independently. With those separated, you'll notice there are some gaps there. That's part of why I want to keep that original image in the background. It'll create a little bit of inconsistency since my masking between the two images was done quickly and I was missing some spots. This will help fill that in, but it shouldn't be too drastic of a thing. So when I'm adjusting my curves, first I want to make this look like daylight. It'll make my images of my person blend a little bit better rather than having to darken these so much into that morning light. So first I'm going to start with this one, and when I adjust the curves, I only want to adjust the curves on this layer. So when I do that, I'm going to come down here, and this half filled circle here, if I click on that, what that's going to do is it's going to pull up all of my adjustments that are capable, etc. This is going to apply that adjustment to that layer only. So I want to go up to curves. And when I do that, it pulls up this graph. What this graph shows me is it graphs out my pixels as far as their level of color. So down at the bottom here, let me expand this so it's a little easier to see. All right. Down at the bottom here, these are my darkest darks. So this would be 0, and then the number for this is 200, something I can't remember off the top of my head. If I click up here, 254, I believe, is the highest it can go. So these are my lightest white, my brightest brights, and these are my darkest darks. If I want my brightest whites to be darker, I can take this and I can guide this down here. Okay, and you'll see that my brights on that bottom half, okay, are getting darker. So if I click on this eye, it's going to show me what it looked like before, or on the top half, excuse me. This is what it looked like before. This is what it's looking like now. Okay, and I can always come and bring that back. The other thing I can do is I can make my darks brighter. So I can take my my darks darker, excuse me. So what this does is it moves my darkest value. So this is now my darkest value in my image. Okay, so it makes my shadows darker, where this is going to make my highlights brighter. It's going to be a smaller range from dark to light. What we can also do with this is we can come up onto this line, and I can grab this line and I can bring this up. So my midtones are now becoming brighter. So I've got a little bit more daylight, and I can also bring this down and make some of my midtones a little bit darker, right? So you create this curve. When you do this, you'll notice that it says RGB. If I want to, I can go in and I can play with specific colors, which I'll go over in just a second. I don't want to keep this S-curve because this isn't really the look I'm going for. So if I come down here and I just click this symbol next to the eye, it's going to reset my curve. So now this is very red because of the color from the street light shining on things. So I want to get rid of some of that red. When you do that though, red, green, and blue have opposite colors. So when I lower my red in my highlights, it's going to turn out a little bit bluer, because the opposite of red in RGB, red, green, blue, the opposite of red is cyan, the opposite of green is magenta, and the opposite of blue is yellow. So if I take down my red, things are going to appear more blue. If I pull down my green, things are going to appear more magenta. If I pull down my blue, you're going to start to get yellowish tones. If you have an image that has yellow tones, you can work the other way to pull some of the yellow out and bring it a little bit back to blue. So you'll see what I mean here. So if I grab my red in my highlights, I want to get rid of some of that. Okay, and I want to make it a little bit more natural. So you'll notice in the background across the street, that orange from the street light is now kind of neutralized a little bit. If I wanted the red back in my shadows and stuff, I can bring that back this way, and you'll notice it's getting redder as I bring that S-curve up. I don't really want to do that. I can bring it up a little bit from where it was, and that's a little bit closer to what I want. Then with my blues, I can come in and I can brighten up, or I can turn it a little bit more yellow, okay, or I can increase the blue. And some of these changes are a little too extreme. I don't necessarily want that. But I do want to pull down my red and maybe adjust some of that green in my shadows. And some of these color changes you notice are going to be, so this shows the red line and the green line that I adjusted. And now it's going to allow me to brighten into daylight a little bit more. So you'll notice that there's a little bit more natural daylight in the background. I can bring this up and make my shadows a little bit brighter. So now I've got a little bit more daylight on the front of these houses, whereas this in here is still that early morning. Okay, and I'm gonna have things too, like these colors in here, that I can go in and adjust manually if I wanted to, because I don't necessarily want to adjust that throughout the whole thing. Okay, so I'm going to keep that where it is. Then I'm going to go to foreground. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to create a curve level that applies just to that. And what I can do here, that again also, is take that red out, give me a little bit more natural light. Oh, that's a little too much. Okay, if you're not happy with it, just adjust it. Can bring this up so it matches a little bit. I could have gone in and masked this section right here, whoops, a little differently. What that would have allowed me to do is I could adjust the colors just on these snowbanks and then the colors on these snowbanks separately, allowing me to create a little bit brighter, a little more daylight in the whole thing. as you go through and you adjust, you'll notice, you know, some things change a little bit more. So now as I bring in these, I want to adjust my curves on these. I'm going to make sure I'm adjusting the curves only on this layer. You'll notice there it adjusts everything. And I don't really want to do that. I want to adjust only what's on there. Some of that mess that's in there. So as I selected through there, this should only adjust. Oh, it's not working for me right now for whatever reason. Oh, if I click here, what this is going to do is it's going to link it to only this layer. I just needed to, I missed the wrong button. So that's going to link it only to that layer. I'm going to get rid of some of these other curves, layers that I don't want. Okay, so now it's linked just to that layer. So when I adjust, I'm only adjusting my subject right here. So when I do that, first I want to get rid of some of that green outline. So I'm going to pull some of that out, and you'll notice that green outline and hue around the edge is gone a little bit. Okay, if I pull it back up, it kind of reappears. And all I'm doing is pulling some of that green out of the highlights. So the brighter it is up here, I can move this even. And then adjust from there. And really kind of pull most of that green out of there. Okay. Then I can go in and I can darken this. So his lighting is closer matched to what is going on elsewhere. It's not going to be perfect. Some of it is the lighting of the background picture that I have with how off it is completely. I'm going to go back here and I'm just going to apply that to the layer below it and do that as well. Okay. Come in and I adjust my curves. And I make sure it's applied only to that layer, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to pull my green out a little bit. So see this spike right here? I want to get past that. That is that green outline right around the edges. So I bring this in so my brightest isn't that bright spike right there. And I can pull this out a little bit. It gets rid of some of that green hue on him. And then again, I can come in and I can darken overall. Okay. So that's how I can adjust the individual colors in each image. If I want a little less blue, you'll notice as I pull this down, it affects only him, but you'll see that green kind of return because the yellow starts to come up. I want a little bit more blue. I can bring that up like that. I can do the same thing with green as we did before, and red as we did with previous layers. So if I want to give that a little bit more muted, since I took the red out of the other ones, I want to probably take some of the red out of this as well. Okay, so now that I've got my, now that you see how you can adjust the curves so that you can adjust how much of each color is in each layer, now we're going to create some false shadows. When we do that, we're going to use a tool called the dodge tool and the burn tool. And what this does is you can create artificial highlights and manipulate the highlights. You can also create some artificial shadows. So as I come in, what this does is when you're actually, let's do shadows first. So we'll go in here, click down on this, and we'll go to the burn tool. And what the burn tool does is it actually burns the pixels. So we want to make sure our exposure isn't too high. It's better to go over an area several times than to burn it too much. So I'm going to show you with the burn up pretty high what this would look like as I come in here. My light source is coming from back here, so my shadow should really be on this side. And as you look at the punched person, his highlight should be on the edge here because that's facing the light source back here. So my shadow would really be on this side. So this is a little reversed because this image that I'm pulling it from was lit from the front. So I'm going to come in and to burn to create some shadows. I'm going to come in here, make sure my range is shadows or midtones. Okay. And what I'm going to do is that's going to burn and darken some of these areas on him and increase the size of my tool a little bit here. So you'll see the color change as I'm going through here onto this burn. Okay, it's enriching some of the colors. The other thing you can do is you can create a filled layer underneath that's darker, and it'll create a darker shadow. Okay, so let me show you how to do that. I'll just back this up a little bit. Get rid of that weird burn mark. Okay. All right, so I'm going to go in here. Oops. I'm going to select and mask. Oops. So, because I only want him selected, I'm just going to hide my other. Oops. Getting a little. Okay. So I'm going to select just him. Oops. Make sure I get him all selected. Go to select and mask. When I do that, I'm going to create just a layer mask. Okay. Then I'm going to edit, fill. I'm going to fill 50% gray and hit OK. Normal mode, opacity 100%. And that'll fill this. And now I've got this mask in here that I can work with. Okay. Okay, if I were to take it off, that's what it would look like. make sure that is underneath my other layer. And as I bring my background and stuff back, I go to burn and make sure my burn is a little bit lower so that it's not as extreme. I can start to create some shadow on the left. Okay, if I want to dodge, which would be creating highlights, I can come in here. I can lighten this side. Okay, where the light from my light source back here is going to come through. Again, if I continue to do this too much, what's going to happen is you're going to get these extremely bright spots that look completely out of place. The other thing I can do is I can come down here because my light source is coming here, make sure I have that area chosen, and I can start to create a shadow in that spot that would be coming off of his shoes and things. Again, 26% is a bit high, but you can see the effect that it has. As it starts to darken, as it comes across. Then if I come and use my dodge tool, I can lighten. And on him I can lighten these edges. And some of this, you'll notice it's a pretty small change. But the idea is that you're able to create that light. You're able to change the lighting effect and manipulate your shadows and your highlights so that you can get a better mesh with the values that you have. So as you're working on your composites, really try to get a background image that has some solid lighting across it. The background image I chose for this really was not that good. So it's going to be difficult to merge all these together. But make sure you choose an image where these can fit in and you can really manipulate your shadows and your highlights enough so that it really looks like that person that you put onto your image belongs there. So that's just quick review of the tools. Try and fine tune them a little bit, play with them a little bit so that it works out, and I can work with you a little bit more one-on-one as you begin to create those highlights and shadows.